The 635th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Alton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
Oh, and dancing in the arms. The high fiver. The celebrator. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead.
Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys here on a Sunday night. Believe it or not, we're inside 48 hours from Carolina's ACC opener. That'll be Tuesday night at home against Florida State. Tip is set for 7 p.m. over on ESPN2. And we're here to get you ready for that contest, the first of 18 straight ACC games for Carolina that it will ultimately define really their tournament seeding and just how high this team can climb, because they put themselves obviously in tournament position. Now they'll be playing for tournament seeding, and hopefully they'll be playing for a really high seed as we get closer and closer to Selection Sunday. As we do in every edition of the pod, we will tell you everything you need to know about the opponent, look at the game from Carolina's perspective, and give our keys to the game. We have a discussion topic as well, but we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, the pod thought of the day. We go to Hubert Davis for one of his first real big quotes as Carolina's head coach, and that is, quote, "We don't do mediocre. We have to be great in everything we do," end quote. And look, there are certain things that Carolina does really, really well. There's certain things they do great. They are a great defensive rebounding team. They're a great defensive team by what KenPom rates, by what just the flat out everyday stats would tell you. But they're not great in everything. There are some aspects that they are mediocre. Perimeter shooting is one. Free throw shooting is another. Opponents' offensive rebounding, they're mediocre in that regard as well. And for Carolina to really capitalize on this fast start, this strong start, those are three areas they have to clean up and become to as close as great as possible if they really want to achieve their regular season goals, which I do think includes winning an ACC regular season championship, and their postseason goals, which would obviously be winning an ACC tournament, something they haven't done since 2016. And I would say a goal was to at least make the Final Four with after a 12-1 start where they find themselves in the AP poll and the net. So this program expects greatness. It demands it. And Carolina, while they've been great in certain aspects, and it's a big reason why they are 12-1, they've got some other areas they've got to become great at if they want to, potentially hang another banner up there in the rafters at the Smith Center.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about some of the areas in particular. I mean, as you said, perimeter shooting really mediocre. I mean, they're 198th in the country. Free throw percentage, it's not even mediocre. They're just downright bad. I mean, they're 283rd in the country, shooting just 68% from the foul line. That's an area that they got to get better. And then, offensive rebounds allowed. They've allowed 11.5 per game, which is 265th in the country. And again, another stat where you're not even really mediocre. You're actually pretty bad in that area. But that's something that Carolina's got to be able to figure out. You'd also like this team to be able to force a few more turnovers. They do a good job of taking care of the ball. That's one thing that I think we've seen as the season has gone along. For the most part, Carolina, especially in big games, has taken care of the basketball well, but they're forcing just 9.7 turnovers per game, which is 353rd in the entire country. So those are areas that you look at and you say Carolina has to get better. But at the same time, there are a lot of areas where Carolina is doing a really great job. Opponents' field goal percentage, 36%. That's fourth in the country. Opponents' two-point percentage, shooting just 41%. That's third in the country. And then even three-point percentage at 28%. That's 19th in the country. So Carolina's doing a really good job. They're keeping teams off the foul line as well. So there are a lot of areas where Carolina is really doing what they need to do. And for the most part, I mean, even rebounding, you look at what they're doing on the defensive glass, they're ranked 8th in the country, but for some reason, there's so many rebounds available because of the missed shots that their opponents have, because of the missed shots that they have. And yet they're not able to come away with certain rebounds that we feel like they should. So they are a good rebounding team that could stand to be a little bit better if they're going to end up taking this thing to the next level. But the good news is that, the start of conference play here, not the most difficult stretch that you're going to face to begin conference play. I'm not saying that every game's a layup, but certainly not. It could be a lot more difficult with some of the other teams that are playing in the ACC this year, like Virginia, like Louisville, like Duke. So you get to avoid those teams really on the first half of the of the conference schedule. But once you get later into conference play, that's where you really have to be firing on all cylinders if you want to beat teams like that.
Well, they have the opportunity to do the same thing the team did 2 years ago when they won an ACC tournament or an ACC regular season title. They stacked a lot of wins. Remember, Carolina started 9-0 in league play that year. I don't know if they'll do that, but the softer part of the schedule is in the first handful of weeks. They got to go to some new venues that they've never been to when they go to SMU, Cal, and Stanford. Those are three teams Carolina should beat, though, if they are what their record suggests they are. So it will be interesting to see just kind of where Carolina is at in league against league competition, which starts on Tuesday. This is our first time recording since the Christmas holiday. Did want to take some time just to hope everyone had a great holiday time with their family. I know I did. We got a really good chance to put the phone down, put the computer away, and spend some quality time with my loved ones. If you got anything cool for Christmas that's Carolina related, don't be afraid to shoot it in the comments here, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, whether it's a photo of what you got or just a message of what you got. I got some good Carolina stuff. I got a new shirt that I'm wearing, among some other things, a cup. The difference is all the Carolina stuff I got for Christmas, I bought. It was not given to me by my loved ones, but if you got something great for Christmas that's Carolina related, as we see Anthony's gut there, don't be afraid as he's holding up one of the signs that he got for Christmas. So it'll just be a fun way to keep the holiday theme going. But I hope you all had a great time with your loved ones. But we got a good basketball team to talk about, so that's what we're here to do tonight. Before we get to Florida State, just want to have our discussion topic here because it does pertain to ACC games and beyond. But I think, I don't remember exactly what we did in preseason predictions, but if Carolina would have went 12-1, we would have both said, yeah, we'll take that. Especially with the win being at Kentucky. You get the dramatic win over Ohio State. You beat Kansas at home. I think we would have stomached a loss to Izzo and Michigan State as much as I may despise him and that program. We would all take a 12-1 start. And so with that, do you think that our expectations have changed for what Carolina can do in league play? Because neither one of us picked this team to win the ACC. I picked Louisville to win the league. I had Duke second. It has coming in third, which would still be a really strong showing for Carolina. But well, we've seen Louisville. They've got some deficiencies. We've seen Duke. They've got a great freshman. They don't have that second, tier player that's on the same level as them. They look even more vulnerable than maybe we thought going in. With what Carolina has in a known tandem of Caleb Wilson, Henry Vassar, you've got Seth Trimble back from injury. Have expectations changed in your mind to where you could really see and expect Carolina to contend for a conference championship?
Yeah, they've been heightened. There's no doubt about that. I mean, as you mentioned, the one team that we think is the best team in this conference right now, at least I think is the best team in this conference right now. I don't want to speak for you. I think it's Duke because of the non-conference schedule that they have played. So if you told me today, if you twisted my arm and said you have to make a pick of who ultimately ends up winning this conference, I would probably go with the Duke Blue Devils. But at the same time, do I think that they are nearly as as well thought of as they were in the preseason? I don't know about that. I mean, look, they've picked up some really nice wins. There's no doubt about that. But that loss to Texas Tech really showed you some of the weaknesses that this team has. I do think that concern about a secondary scorer is definitely something that you're going to see crop up in some of the bigger games for them this year. In most games, they'll be perfectly fine. You've got a guy that can score the ball about as well as anybody in college basketball in Cameron Boozer. But if somebody's able to take him away or even limit the production that he brings to a game, ultimately, what's that going to look like for that team? I think with Carolina, we've talked about how with, if you limit one guy, well, you still have two other guys that are out there. And we're talking about finding that fourth scorer for Carolina. So I really feel like, Carolina's got themselves in a pretty good spot. I think right now they're better than Louisville. I think Louisville, tough non-conference schedule. There's no doubt about that. But I think there are some holes for them that Carolina doesn't necessarily have. So I really do think that the expectation is that Carolina is going to compete for the ACC title. I think they're the biggest threat to Duke right now in the ACC. And coming into the year, I thought they were going to be in tier 2. I thought it was going to be Duke. It was going to be Louisville that would be the top two candidates to win the conference. Carolina would be there, but probably as a little bit of a distant third. This team has gotten to the point now where I think they're showing that they are going to be the team that Duke is going to have to compete with. And I think those games are going to be incredibly close between these two sides.
If you look at the advanced metrics, they would suggest that Duke's the best team in this conference. And I do think when maybe Duke is playing at their best might be better than our best right now. They've got a lot of quad one wins, and you can't take those away. Those are what matter the most right now in college basketball, how we decipher who's good and who isn't. It doesn't look the same, though, like it was a year ago, where when Carolina walked on the court with them, they were outmatched. Duke was bigger, faster, stronger, better coached, and that's why they beat Carolina 3 times, in a season a year ago. Carolina isn't as battle-tested as Duke, and that's in large part because of the way Carolina's scheduled. But I don't think that they're not capable of playing with Duke. And that was something that was evident last year when Carolina went to Durham. They just weren't in the same class, the same stratosphere as that Duke team was last year. So I do think Carolina has heightened expectations, but it's where everyone within the program expects to be anyway. Like Carolina's not fazed by where they are. I don't think that Hubert Davis feels any more pressure today than he did yesterday, knowing that he's got a team that should compete to win a conference championship, because that's what we expect as Carolina fans. And I think that's a good thing. And you've got a freshman that knows he's only here for 1 year, but is wanting to accomplish a career's worth of achievements in that 1 year. And so Caleb Wilson's not going to let this team rest on its laurels because he wants to chase a regular season title. He's going to chase a conference tournament title. He's going to chase, playing deep into the month of March. And I think all that could really fuel a team that's never been here before. They're all hungry. They're all motivated. And they're really, poised, I think, to really create their own history and write their own story. And we'll see how that unfolds over the next 18 games. The second thing, and this was the biggest storyline that we knew coming into the year that would overshadow every time Carolina got beat. And luckily, we've only had to discuss one loss so far. We expect there to be more losses to come in league play, but Carolina should have a really healthy record at the end of the regular season going into conference tournament and NCAA tournament play. Do you think the noise around Hubert and his job security has quieted down in a way that maybe you didn't expect entering the season? Because, I said it so much in the offseason that when Carolina loses, we would not talk about why they got beat. We talk about the head coach. And I feel like in the one loss we've discussed so far this year, that loss to Michigan State, we actually talked about why Carolina got beat and not the head coach, which is a lot more refreshing than I thought it was going to be. Do you think the noise has quieted down enough to where this is, barring a collapse, not going to be as big as a talking point as maybe we thought back in June, July, or August?
Yeah, I would say that it should be. Is it going to be? I think is going to be interesting for when we get that first conference loss. What's the conversation ultimately going to be? Because we saw it even a little bit after that Michigan State game, man. There were people that were questioning some of the things that Hubert was doing. They were questioning some of the rotations that Hubert was using in those games. And I feel like that's always the easy thing to go to when you go back and look at it, and Carolina just wasn't efficient enough on the offensive end in that game. They didn't do what they needed to do defensively. Getting to the paint was way too easy in that game for Michigan State. They let Jeremy Fears basically do whatever he wanted to do in that game, and that's the reason that Carolina ultimately lost. Now, I didn't hear as much Hubert talk after that game as I thought I was going to hear, so maybe that's really going to be what people are going to look at this year is, hey, if this team doesn't execute at certain points, it's going to be more about the team because we've seen that this team can play at its best in some of these moments. I get it. Kentucky certainly wasn't their best. Ohio State wasn't their best throughout the entire game, but when it mattered the most, they found a way to pull out victories. The thing is that game against Kansas, I think, bought him a little bit of reprieve because Carolina really played a great game against the Kansas Jayhawks. And so I think that the conversation should not necessarily be around him after every loss, but we'll have to wait and see ultimately to see what the fan base thinks. I think he certainly, though, with the way that he has started, with the wins that he has picked up, that heat is certainly backed off because if Carolina, let's say, loses that game against Ohio State, loses that game against Kentucky, we're talking about a much, much different scenario for Hubert Davis. We're talking about him needing to be great in conference play for Carolina or for him to get, ultimately where the team wants to go and for him to quiet what some of the doubters would be saying about him.
Yeah, you look at that Ohio State win, for as much as you can complain about how Carolina had to win the game, they don't win that game without Hubert Davis's tactics in the final minute, drawing up the full court press, that got the turnover, the two sets that had to get Carolina a bucket. You got to give him credit for. And then look, that Kentucky win, a lot of people didn't want to give him credit at the time because it was an ugly win. But you look up, and since then, Kentucky beat a good Indiana team. They beat St. John's the same day we beat Ohio State. That team's getting healthier. No, you didn't beat Kentucky at full strength, but that win's going to look a lot better come Selection Sunday than it did when it happened because when that Wildcat team's at full strength, that's a top 5 roster in the sport. why they spent $22 million on it this season. And so you've got those types of wins. That Kansas win's not going to go away. Whether Kansas is a legitimate title contender or not, they're not going to be bad enough for that win to not be respected and valued by the committee. And that's the difference from this year against last year, is that Carolina had none of those wins. None at this time a year ago. Yep. You've now got a handful, and you now play in a league that's better than it was a year ago. That's going to give you more and more opportunities to actually build a resume, as opposed to what you did last year where you just backslid your way into the tournament. Yes, I thought you deserved to be there, but we can all admit the truth. The big reason why Carolina was in the field because of what their name is and what their rating would bring, Turner and CBS. That's not going to be the case this year. And Hubert Davis deserves a lot of credit because he's doing this with 11 new guys. This isn't like, he brought back a bunch of guys that have been in the system 2-3 years. But this roster came together in a month and a half if you count the Luka Bogovac edition. And there's just a chemistry with this group that there wasn't a year ago. There's a cohesiveness with this group that wasn't a year ago. And there's a professionalism about this group that I think reflects who he is as a head coach. And that's why I think they've been really fun to watch here, outside of just the fact that they're winning. It's the way that they've won that you can really admire and appreciate from a Carolina fan's perspective. Let's get to the matchup with the Noles. Let's get into the first ACC preview of the year. Carolina since 1949, 1950, 57 and 16 all-time against Florida State. So, the Noles have been very competitive against Carolina since they joined the league. But as you could expect with Florida State being a football school, Carolina has owned these matchups primarily since they joined the conference back in the 1990s. This edition of Florida State, they bring with them just a 7-6 record on the year. They are 0-2 away from home with two drastic results. They lost close to Florida in a rivalry matchup, 78-76, and they got blown out at Dayton 97-69. They have four players that are averaging double figures in scoring, led by Robert McCray V and his 13.5 points, 3.7 rebounds, 7.1 assists. He shoots 44% from the field, 28% from three. Chauncey Wiggins is second on the team in scoring at 12 points, 4.3 rebounds, 0.8 assists. He is shooting 40% from the field, 29% from three. LeJay Jones is their third scorer, 11.7 points, 4.6 rebounds, 1.1 assists. He is shooting 41% from the field, 32% from three. And then Kobe McGee, their last double-digit scorer, 10.5 points, 3.9 rebounds, 1.2 assists. He is shooting 39% from the field, 32% from three. And some numbers that stand out about the Noles, they average 67.6 shots per game, the third highest mark in college basketball. They average making 11.4 threes per game. That's 12th most in the sport. Well, they average attempting 36.2, the second highest figure in all of college basketball. They are 109th overall in KenPom. Their adjusted offensive efficiency rating is 112. That's 114th in the sport. Their adjusted defensive rating of 105.9 is 112th in the sport, and they come into the game ranked 129th in the net. When you see the Florida State numbers on paper, what stands out to you about Luke Lauch's team and what the challenges will present Carolina on Tuesday night at the Dean Dome?
Yeah, they're going to shoot a ton of threes. That's going to be the main thing that Carolina's got to be aware of, is this is a team that shoots a lot of them, makes a lot of them, but only because of how much they shoot, because they are not an efficient team from beyond the arc. The thing is, though, when you shoot that many from beyond the arc, there are going to be certain games where you could end up getting hot. So for Carolina, I mean, that's the area of focus that you have to have in this game. I mean, you look at this team overall, just a poor shooting team in general. I mean, 42.2%, that is good enough for 311th in the country. They are a team that does not shoot a lot of shots inside the arc because of how much they shoot it outside. So this is a team that honestly matches up with Carolina's defense really well in Carolina's favor, because they are a team that does like to play on the perimeter. One of the things that Carolina has struggled with here, here recently is that, Carolina's allowed a lot of points in the paint at certain times, certain halves. They've allowed a lot of points in the paint. Usually the second half of games, they do end up responding, but especially in first halves, teams have been able to get to the paint relatively easily. You don't see that with this team. That's not necessarily where you're looking when it comes to this group. You're looking for them to be more of a threat from beyond the arc. In terms of getting to the free throw line, that's solid as well. So that's something that Carolina's got to make sure they do is defend without fouling. And then, one of the other numbers that does stick out to them, an area where Carolina is going to have to make sure they do a good job in, is taking care of the basketball. This is a team that opponents against them average 17.5 turnovers. Now, I'd be interested, and I'd have to go back and do a lot more extra work that I did not do before we came on the podcast. But, I'd be interested to see how many of those turnovers really came against bad teams that they had on their schedule, as opposed to teams that are actually pretty good. Because you look at a lot of the games that they've played so far this year, I mean, on paper, this is a team that scores 85 points per game, and you would think, okay, that's pretty solid. But it's against teams that really aren't that great. The only team that they have scored well against that you look at and say, maybe that means something, is maybe the game against UMass. They ended up losing that game. Every other game of significance, they haven't really scored the basketball at all, and teams have been able to score it on them pretty easily. I mean, you look at A&M, puts 95 on them. Georgia puts 107 on them. Houston, a very defensive minded team, puts 82 on them. So, I mean, yeah, that's got to be something that I think coming into this game, Carolina feels good about. It's not really a great team. It's probably one of the lesser teams that you're going to play in the ACC this season, but it's still one that you can't take lightly, because it's going to be better than some of the teams that you've seen this year that you've walked in the first half against. That has led to some close scores at halftime that have had us a little bit frustrated. So they can't just think they're going to roll the ball out and easily win this game.
I think from a matchup perspective, I think Carolina likes the matchup. But Florida State's going to put up a bunch of shots. That's going to create a lot of possessions. I think that favors Carolina because Carolina's deeper. And I think, for an offense that's looking to find an extra gear, generating just more scoring opportunities with having more possessions definitely goes a long way. Also, the fact that Luke Laux is now old enough to coach his alma mater, and I watched him play as a young Carolina fan, ages me in a way that I'm not comfortable talking about, but that's where we are, man. We're in that era. I mean, Kim English, I watched him play. He's now a head coach at a power conference school. This one though, like hit different whenever I saw that he was coming back to coach his alma mater, because I vividly remember watching him on those early, really good Florida State teams as Leonard Hamilton was really building them into a quality program there in the conference in the 2010s. So, they play a fun style. They play an NBA style, but I think it's one that I think Carolina could really take advantage of if they play to their capabilities on both ends of the floor. You look at the game from Carolina's perspective, they bring with them, as we mentioned, that 12-1 record, first 12-1 start since 2008, 2009. That year, Carolina would go on to win the national championship. The Heels are 12th in the AP poll. They are 9-0 at home, and they've won those games by an average margin of 22.7. Carolina also, they have 4 players averaging double-figure scoring, led by Caleb Wilson, 19.6 points per game, 10.8 rebounds, 2.3 assists. He is shooting 55% from the field, 29% from 3. Henry Bassar, the second leading scorer, 16.8 points, 9.2 rebounds, 1.9 assists. He is shooting 64% from the field, 50% from 3. Seth Trimble, in limited production, but averaging 14.5 points, 4 rebounds, 3.8 assists. He is shooting 44% from the field, 27% from 3. Then Luka Bogovac, the last guy to average double figures, 11.1 points, 3 rebounds, 2.8 assists. He is shooting 41% from the field, 32% from three. The Heels are 8th in the country in defensive rebounds, 30.2. And opponents are shooting just 36% against Carolina. That's the 4th worst mark in the sport. And 41% from inside the three-point line. That's the 3rd worst mark in the sport. And Carolina's quietly a top, 20 scoring defense, averaging just giving up 63.5 points per game. That's 16th fewest in all of college basketball. The Heels, their KenPom rating a lot better than Florida State's, 22nd overall. Their adjusted offensive rating is 40th at 119.4. Their adjusted defensive rating is 97.0. That's 19th in all of college basketball. And the Heels are a healthy 15th in the net. Let's now get to our keys to the game before we make our predictions. As you could imagine, with as many shots as Florida State takes, as many shots as Florida State makes, three-point defense is going to be critical in this matchup. And I run them off the three-point line. And that's simply because I think you want to try to take away some attempts. Because if they bomb it, 36 times, odds are they're going to make 9, 10 of them. And that's just a really high number. Whereas maybe if you get them down to like 28, 30 attempts, if their make number is following the percentages, now they're in the 6, 7 range. That's just a big difference in a game like this. I'd love to see some full court press, just to kind of get them out of their action and make them have to grind out some clock. We've seen some 2-3 zone from Carolina with the reserves. Do we see some 2-3 zone with the starters and maybe see if Florida State can shoot them out of it? But regardless, this is a team that if they play the way they want to play, they're going to shoot the ball 35-plus times from behind the three-point line. I'd like to see Carolina maybe try to get that number down to 28-30, but not because they're giving up, open lanes to the basket, but just because they're actually taking away some looks for them from behind the three-point line.
Yeah, that's the main thing, right? Is don't give up the easy shots on the interior because you're so worried about the perimeter. But, you'd like to limit the amount of shots that they have out there because, as I said, any night for a team that shoots as many of them as they do could be a night where all of a sudden they get hot and they're knocking down 15, 18 threes. And then you're in a game where you don't want to necessarily be in that game. You're playing a 90-point game, which, Carolina, I think, is capable of playing, especially with this team who isn't great defensively. But you don't want to be in that area. You want to control the pace of the game. You want to control how the scoring is going. And for Carolina, I think they like it being somewhere in the 80s. And I think that's the area that Carolina would probably feel comfortable. So I think you're right. You got to be able to run them off of the three-point line, make them, become a little uncharacteristic to what the stats tell you, and make them go to areas of the floor where they haven't necessarily succeeded this season, areas that you will be able to hopefully take away or at least contest shots. I think that's going to be one of the biggest points for Carolina coming into this game. The good news is that Carolina's been contesting a lot of stuff from beyond the arc at a pretty high rate so far this year. I expect that that's going to continue in this game, especially, against a team that is going to shoot it as much as they do from the outside there. Again, the opponent's three-point percentage is 19th in the country at just 28% because of how well Carolina is defending out there. They've allowed opponents to hit just 6.2 per game. With this team, I don't know if that's going to be quite the area that they get to, but if you could limit them to somewhere 8 to 10, I think you're feeling pretty good, especially with how many times they're going to shoot it from the outside.
The second key to the game that I wrote down is quite simple. Make your foul shots. With the way that Carolina plays and the amount of pressure they put on the rim, whether it's through, Caleb Wilson, Henry Vassar, or Seth Trimble driving, Carolina's got to make their free throws. It was going to be the reason why, had they lost to Ohio State, they would have lost. And there have been other games where Carolina's left double-digit points at the foul line. You have some wins that could be 50-point wins if you just quite simply make your free throws. You have some other wins that could be by a bigger margin than what they were if they make your free throws. Do you have games that wouldn't have been close in the second half, i.e. Ohio State, if you're making your foul shots? And what's maddening is like we've seen them have games where they shoot 80+% from the free throw line on a high number of makes, but it seems like here recently they're stuck in that, that 60 percentile range, whether it's in the low 60s or the high 60s. And man, you can't do that in this league and win. You just can't. That's how you get beat. That's how you get upset. And I don't want to start I don't want to end the year on such a bad note after the way that we've started non-conference play. And so, the thing is you expect Carolina to get to the foul line. It's just you can't go 1 for 2 as many times as Carolina goes 1 for 2. And it's not just Caleb Wilson or Henry Vassar. This is an issue with Jonathan Powell, and an issue with Seth Trimble at times as well. Like the fact that I feel a lot more confident when, a freshman like Derek Dixon is at the foul line over Seth Trimble is problematic. Because I should trust my fourth-year senior to make those 2 shots over a freshman that's played 13 games. But, you mentioned it earlier, they're 283rd or whatever it was in free throw shooting in college basketball.
Yeah.
That's not a number that can compete for a conference championship. That's not a number that can compete to make a Final Four. So that's got to be something that there's got to be gradual improvement here as we start ACC play.
Yeah, and what better game for this to happen than a game like this against a Florida State team that's a little bit of a weaker opponent? I don't know if it ends up costing you the game if you don't end up shooting well from the free throw line, but at some point you're going to have to start shooting better there. It's got to start clicking at some point for this group if they're going to be better. And so hopefully that's what we're going to see. I mean, again, it's still early in the season. I mean, we're right near that midway point. So you can still, really continue to form your identity. You don't want your identity to be that you're a bad free throw shooting team. So yeah, it's up to everybody to be able to knock down their shots there. I mean, you've mentioned it. The reason why we've been talking the most about Caleb Wilson and Henry Vassar, they are the guys that are getting to the foul line. These other guys not necessarily getting to the foul line nearly as often. So you'd like to see them be aggressive, trying to get to the foul line. We've talked about being aggressive going to the hoop. That's certainly something that Seth Trimble's going to be able to bring. That's a guy that you need to be able to make his free throws for you. Most importantly, Luka Bogovac, when he gets to the foul line, got to be better at shooting free throws. But that's something that hopefully will come along as the season progresses here. Because, yeah, if they're going to be a team that's going to compete for an ACC regular season title, if they're going to be a team that wants to make a run in either the ACC championship and then eventually in March, you're going to need to make your foul shots at a legitimately high rate. So I think that's going to be important for Carolina. Hopefully that's something they've been working on here during the holidays and something that we'll see improved in this game against the Seminoles on Tuesday.
Last thing I wrote down was it was basically a 2-1 combined. Limit the turnover, something Carolina for the most part has done a much better job of doing. You had some, it was a double-digit turnovers against ECU, but with as many possessions as that game had, the result, it wasn't that big of a deal. This doesn't need this. We don't need this to come back like it was the first handful of games where Carolina's turning it over 7-8 times in the first half, giving you easy points to the other way, because this team will look for transition threes, not twos. And those are the second hardest three to defend in the sport behind threes off an offensive rebound. But the second key and the bigger one, dominate the interior. This should be a game that Caleb Wilson, Henry Vassar have their fingerprints all over. And we're going to say that a lot. We've said that a lot already. We're going to say that a lot in conference play because this is the best front court tandem in the sport. If you want to go trio, I mean, Florida may have 3 of them. Carolina may only have 2, but to me, they're the best 2. They're the 2 I take anytime out on the court. And so I want to see that translate. I want to see, Caleb Wilson do what he does best, get a lot of dunks, draw a lot of fouls, and just be a matchup problem. And the same thing for Vassar, because when they're both playing at a high level, guess what you can't do? You can't double team them. And when you get these guys, they're so good in one-on-one situations. You'll see Carolina's offense hit another gear because they'll just be that much more efficient because these guys are good players. They can make contested shots, but they also know when to make the right pass to the open teammate. That's either backdoor cutting, open in the corner, so on and so forth. So, statistically, you're plus 4-ish, in terms of rebounding. They average, right, it's about more like 3. Carolina averages about 42 boards. Florida State right at about 39 if you round up. So Carolina has the advantage in paper on the glass that needs to carry over. And Carolina's going to look to score inside out, where they're going to look to score outside in. Carolina should dominate points in the paint in this matchup through their 2 best players. And so, we've compared them a lot to Tyler Zeller and John Henson. What did they do when they were the 2 best players for Carolina? They led UNC to an ACC championship. That journey starts on Tuesday with 18 straight conference games coming up next. That's a great way to start at home from the Carolina faithful. Let your 2 best players carry you to a win.
Yeah, I mean, the domination in the interior, I think, is something that you should definitely expect in this game. And I mean, this is a group that's more than capable of living up to that. I mean, they've done it for most of the season. And I mean, this is a team that is allowing a really high percentage in the paint this year, or at least inside the arc this year. 52.6% field goal percentage against them from 2-point range. So, I mean, that's a team that, it ranks 259th in the country. That's an area that Carolina should want to be hitting at pretty often in this game, especially because they do a pretty good job of defending the perimeter. So this is an area that you're hoping Carolina is going to be able to be dominant. On the glass, you would hope that Carolina can be dominant as well. This is another team, though, that's pretty sneaky in terms of the rebounding. I mean, especially the offensive rebounding. 14.6 per game is 11th in the country. So Carolina's got to make sure that they do a better job of rebounding than they have, here over these last handful of games that we saw before the holiday break. Hopefully this is back to being dominant Carolina on the glass, where they're not allowing the offensive rebounds. They're really vacuuming up those defensive boards, and then they're able to get some of their own offensive rebounds, create those second chance opportunities in this game for yourself, because, this is a team that likes to play high possession game. They're 67.8 field goal shots per game. That's 3rd in all of college basketball. So they're going to want to play at a high pace. They're going to want to, put up a lot of shots. And part of that is because of the turnovers that they're able to create too. Limit those extra opportunities for Florida State in this game. As I mentioned earlier, 17.5 turnovers per game forced. That's an area that Carolina does not want to get back to some of their early season struggles in. Especially in the first half of this game. Don't get into a situation where you're down early and have to find your way, try to fight your way back because of the turnover issues. But as you said, one thing I'd like to see Carolina do, let's use that full court press a little bit. Let's get them out of what they want to do and create some of those turnovers ourselves, just in case there are some turnovers from Carolina's side of things. But really, it's just about being smart with the basketball. We've seen this group really be able to do that for most of the year. These are 2 important things that Carolina has to do, but I feel pretty confident in this area that Carolina will take care of both of these things that they have to do in this game.
All right, Carolina enters with an 88.7% chance to win the game. That, according to ESPN's matchup predictor. You're actually going in my place. You'll be in the arena. You'll be up on press row on Tuesday night watching the game. I'll let you go first. Who wins the game and why?
Yeah, I think Carolina wins the game, and I think it is one of the more comfortable wins that they're going to have in conference play. I just think that Carolina matches up really well with this team. If this was a team that was really hammering the paint, was a team that was able to score at a pretty high percentage at the rim, I would be a little concerned, because those are the teams that are going to concern you going into conference play. it's the teams like this that are going to focus on just shooting on the perimeter, where Carolina should be able to match up pretty well. They have a really good perimeter defense. I think this will be another game where you see Carolina thrive on that end of the floor. And I think the other thing is that for the most part, these guys are taking care of the basketball. The guys that we're focused on when there's turnover issues this year, the last few years, it's really been one guy or, really the backcourt in general, but particularly a guy like Elliot Cadeau. This year, that's the thing, man. I know Kyan Evans isn't playing great. I know that Derek Dixon hasn't put up huge numbers himself, but these guys are out there and they're efficient when they're passing the basketball. I think you're going to see that in this game. Carolina takes care of the basketball. I think they, find success, especially on that interior scoring the ball in this one. I think they'll get into a pretty good offensive groove in this one. I think that perimeter shooting, that before the break, Carolina against East Carolina, the best perimeter shooting night of the season. I think that carries over as well. There's a little bit of confidence, I think, now in this group from beyond the arc. So I think they'll knock down some threes in this game. And I think Carolina, in pretty comfortable fashion, gets it done against Florida State.
Yeah, I think Carolina wins. And I really love the message I heard from Hubert Davis going into the holiday break. He was happy with what they've achieved, but not satisfied. I think it's a different tone from Carolina's head coach. I don't think he's going to let up on this group because I think he knows what this group is capable of. And I think, there's now a new challenge ahead of them. The challenge was to put together a successful non-con season. Carolina did that. Now the challenge, go win an ACC championship. The best way to do that is to win the games you're supposed to win, and this is a game that Carolina is supposed to win. Because, our buddy here, Darren Cox, writes from YouTube, may lose to Florida State, but if we do, it'd be because we must be playing terrible because Florida State ain't getting blown out by everybody. Look, if Carolina loses, bad loss. If Carolina loses this game, I'm going to be yelling and kicking and screaming, which some of y'all want to see that happen anyway. I think some of y'all would rather them lose and hear me complain than this team win and hear me praise, but this will be a bad loss. And I don't want to see this conference season get started out that way. You've got the two best players on the court. I expect those guys to record double-doubles or close to it. You've got Steph Trimble. You could argue might be the third best player on the court that's on your team. I think that just overwhelms Florida State in a way that they won't be able to handle. I think Carolina gets a comfortable win at home to begin ACC competition. No matter what happens, we'll have you covered here on the podcast, but also on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Been kind of quiet just with the nature of the holidays coming and going, but we'll be getting we'll be getting back to it this week with ACC competition underway for Carolina basketball. The portal officially opens for Tar Heel football on Friday. They're still trying to finalize an offensive coordinator hire. Then it's on to find the special teams coach. So all that coverage, basketball, football, can be found HeelToughBlog.com. They're your best home for the best coverage of those two programs. As for the pod, you know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, just search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the regular season. If you consume us on the digital platform, the best way to keep up to date, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. The second we go live, you'll be notified, and you can jump in and be a part of the conversation. With that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. Well, I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.